everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture. I hope you are all enjoying The War Between the Land and the Sea so far. But with the new spin-off now airing, it got us thinking about spin-offs in general. So we asked for your thoughts and ideas on potential spin-offs for Doctor Who. So let's see if anyone had any better ideas than the Sea Devils, which, might I add, has been way better than I thought it was going to be. So, you know, don't judge a book by its cover. Sea Devil spin-off, actually pretty good. Before I begin though, you might remember, a little while ago I was sporting a lovely WhoCulture t-shirt and I promised that more would be on the way. Well, Merry Christmas folks, because we now have another design up on our store. It is the Ups and Downs design. Do I have mine on? No, because it hasn't arrived yet, but you can be sure it is on its way. It's in the post and you should be getting yours too. Okay, so let's take a look at some of your suggestions for Doctor Who spin-offs, starting with this one from Dr. Mysterio 15. Great username. They say, I have a good one. A prequel series focused on the Doctor and the Master while studying in the Time Lords Academy, with emphasis on how the same teachings had so different impact on both of them and how different life was for those outside the Citadel. It would be mostly a slice of life with focus on drama and expanding Gallifrey's lore and its relationship with the rest of the universe before the Time War. I like it. This is really interesting actually, because the other franchise that I talk a lot about on another channel is Star Trek, and they actually have Starfleet Academy releasing in January. And this is kind of a similar vibe where we're going back to the beginning and looking at the training of the characters that we now know and love. So it's very interesting that you suggested this. I don't know if Dr. Mysterio 15 is also a Star Trek fan. But yes, I do like the idea of seeing our heroes before they were our heroes or villains. This could be really interesting, and I did see another comment as well that focused on Gallifrey specifically. And I do think that could be something very interesting, especially to look at prior to the Time War. And I do also agree that seeing the Doctor and the Master before they were these mortal enemies could be very interesting, and seeing, like this comment says, how they became such different people despite having the same training and maybe not the same upbringing, and where those differences lie and what triggered the Master to take a different path. Now, we obviously learned a little bit about that when we in series 3, but yeah, I do like that. I also like that it, unlike some of the suggestions that I'll get to in a while, it doesn't necessarily entirely focus on bringing back past companions or following our companions into the future. It kind of is its own thing, if that makes sense. Yes, the Doctor and the Master are there, but they'll be played by young performers. We don't actually know a lot about the Time Lords in general, so that it could be a really interesting concept. I like it. Good suggestion. Let's move on to the next one. This is from Andrew Bowman 4611. Andrew says, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the War Between subtitle leads to other stories in that series. For example, the War Between the Red and the Blue could be a battle between Mars and Earth, bringing back the Ice Warriors and giving them a formidable makeover. Or the War Between the Land and the Sky, which deals with multiple alien invasions featuring underrated villains from the show's past like the Dravins, the Dominators and the Crotons. Frankly, the potential is endless. Again, I like this. I like that we're taking what we have with the War Between the Land and the Sea and then developing that almost into an anthology series, if you like, that takes that subtitle but focuses on different areas. And there have been a lot of comments with regards to the first 2 episodes of the War Between the Land and the Sea about the fact that the Silurians haven't really been mentioned. So it could be quite interesting to take that subtitle and incorporate the Silurians somehow. I was trying to think how that would work, because it can't be the War Between the Land and the land. I don't know, the title TBD. But I like this concept of focusing on the different kind of areas and keeping that subtitle. I really like that. I also like the idea of the War Between the Red and the Blue and focusing on the Ice Warriors. I mean, as you say, the possibilities are endless. There are so many possibilities that could be done here, but I like that this takes something that already exists and then develops it into something wider. Because I don't know at this point that the War Between the Land and the Sea is... I don't think it's been designed to have more than one series. Obviously, we now know that the Disney deal is not continuing, so that also puts a spanner in the works. So to develop it into an anthology that could continue without treading all over what they've done for this 5-part mini-series, but be able to also continue it. I think that would be really interesting. So well done. Thank you, Andrew. I like that idea. Okay, let's just cover this one because you know I'm going to say it, and there were so many of you that also said this in the comments. I haven't picked one out specifically because there were just multiple comments saying this, but obviously a River Song spin-off. It honestly blows my mind that this has not been done already. Now, before those people who I can already hear typing away, Big Finish have done an absolutely marvellous job of continuing River Song's story and expanding her journey in her life and her relationship with various incarnations of the Doctor. They've done an incredible job, and they have a series called The Diary of River Song. And as fantastic as that is as an audio series, it also would translate so well on screen, and it baffles me that that wasn't done at any point. Especially now that Alex Kingston has become a little bit more popular to a BBC audience and the UK viewers, especially following her being a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. It was a missed opportunity. I don't know if it's something they would do now. I think maybe that ship has sailed, which is really sad, but there's so many possibilities. I mean, River Song is a character very similar to Captain Jack, or even to an extent Sarah Jane Smith. Like, the blueprint for what her spin-off could look like is literally there. And I think I've spoken about this before, but I think the perfect place for base camp to be would be Stormcage. She's in Stormcage. She's in her cell, she's interacting probably with all sorts of different criminals and convicts and whoever else is in Stormcage, but she's also fully capable of escaping from Stormcage whenever she feels like it. So, you know, she jumps in and out, has adventures, the Doctor could pop in every now and then and she has an adventure with him, but she also is capable of having her own adventures. The Husbands of River Song shows that she is doing all of these things without knowing the Doctor is around, and she's carrying that, and has a less of a moral compass than the Doctor does, and so that could make things very interesting. The sorts of almost like a pirate. She's like a pirate. She's a space pirate, you know? She does what she wants to do, but she also kind of learns from her interactions with the Doctor. You could have Amy and Rory popping up in there as well. Why have they not done it? Seriously, why have they not done it? Someone at the BBC tell me why you never did a River Song spin-off. She's right there! Okay, this next one, honestly, I'm impressed. I'm so impressed. This is from Jonathan Smith 473, and he says, I would love to see a Judoon spin-off where one Judoon has to track a wanted alien fugitive who's hid out as a human. He has to turn human and learn how to function in this human world, the classic fish out of water. He meets a woman who works in a care home for the elderly, and he learns to value life. All the while, strange deaths and other bizarre things are going on. He has to deal with the local Earth police, all the while becoming more human, namely thanks to this woman. But plot twist, the woman is the alien he was looking for. Full on plot right there. Again, like the Sea Devils, the Judoon aren't necessarily a species or an alien or a monster that I would initially go, they're a good idea for a spin-off. But actually, this I really like. And I like the twist that this person he bonds with turns out to be the person he's chasing. Again, that's also a concept we've seen plenty of times. You know, the person who's being apprehended, you know, forms a bond with the person who's chasing them. Like, that's the concept of many, many stories, but I like the twist here. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I also like the idea of having having a care home. It's different, and I like that that's where you would learn to value life. Hearing stories from the elderly about the lives they've lived and seeing the value of caring for those who once cared for you. There could be so many really heartfelt moments in a story like this. So I think Jonathan has made a really great suggestion there. I was really impressed by that one. And the reason that I like that one as well is there is a slight familiarity to it, which leads to the next one, which plenty of people suggested, but I just picked out Paul Bowler 5345 for an example. A Fugitive Doctor spin-off. As soon as I hear Judoon tracking somebody on Earth, of course it makes you think of the Fugitive Doctor's first story. But again, I've said it so many times, the Fugitive Doctor is there. Perfect recipe for a spin-off that could work. Jo Martin's character, honestly, has so much untapped potential and story. We know next to nothing about this character. Again, Big Finish, our Lord and Saviours who take these underdeveloped characters and give them a full story and life. But in terms of on the mainstream, on TV, we've barely touched the surface, barely scratched the surface with the Fugitive Doctor. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people maybe have issue, obviously with the whole timeless child situation, the introduction of this incarnation that we knew nothing about that's supposed to have come before William Hartnell. If you're going to introduce a character like that, you've at least got to make it pay off and give us the details of who this character is. But we have barely explored this character, and that makes it feel like it was just done for the sake of it and more like a gimmick. Whereas if we had a series where we could really dive into the adventures of this character and what led to the circumstances of the Doctor no longer remembering that they were this incarnation, and dive into the division and all of those things that were teased in that big reveal that we've never really touched upon since. So I think that would be brilliant. And I think I mentioned this obviously with the Fugitive Doctor making an appearance in The Story and the Engine. We started to get a little bit of backstory there, but we just need more of it. And before we knew kind of what was going to happen with Doctor Who in this gap where we didn't know, are we going to get more Doctor Who, what's happening, I did suggest that maybe a good filler for the gap, rather than leaving us hanging with nothing for such a long time, would be to take something we do have and explore that, and have kind of a mini series, a placeholder that explores the Fugitive Doctor's life, which doesn't contradict anything that, it doesn't mess around with once Ncuti Gatwa has obviously regenerated into Billie Piper and then whatever's going on there. Having a Fugitive Doctor story in the middle that's a prequel isn't going to interfere with the continuation of Doctor Who, but also gives us more story for the Fugitive Doctor. I think it would be a really, really good idea. At the moment, that's one that I feel like is potentially more likely to happen. If we're looking at ones that actually might well happen, the Fugitive Doctor is right there, ready and waiting, and still relevant. I mean, the River Song one I would love to happen, but we've not seen River Song in literally 10 years. The Fugitive Doctor literally appeared in the latest season of Doctor Who, so who knows? Now, this is another one that I think would have great potential as a spin-off for a younger audience like the Sarah Jane Adventures. This is from Benjamin Crispin 7411. Benjamin says, I think I'd like to see a spin-off about the Time Hotel where we would follow Anita as she manages the hotel. The show would keep some of the time travel elements from Doctor Who, but would be more focused on Anita and the guests and employees of the hotel. Making this a show similar to the Sarah Jane Adventures, with Anita as our focal point and then some extra characters here and there, maybe different characters from different time periods that have come through the different Time Hotel doors and have stuck around for whatever reason. But I think that could be really, really interesting to see and really fun. And the reason I say this could be a really good show for a younger audience is it could almost act as a history lesson. The whole idea of children's TV is to kind of be teaching all the time. And if this was something on CBBC, it could be something very similar to like a combination of Doctor Who and Horrible Histories. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I grew up on Horrible Histories. Horrible Histories was brilliant. And it taught you things. You remember things because of the silly rhymes and the silly gags and gimmicks that they had. So I think actually if we had the Time Hotel and we had our group of core characters, but it also worked as a learning and a teaching show as well, tapping into a well that we haven't really touched for a while, which is the younger viewers. And obviously we do have the CBeebies cartoon animation coming at some point. But if we were looking to expand on something that already exists within the show and could maybe be aimed at a slightly older audience than CBeebies and fill that slot that the Sarah Jane Adventures had, I think that would be a really good slot to fill. I think the Time Hotel would be a really good setting for that. It lends itself to being a teaching concept just by having doors into history. Okay, moving on. We have Edith Mayrother 6982. I apologise, I probably just butchered your username. Edith says, a Valeyard spin-off where the Valeyard is played by a former Doctor actor. I could definitely imagine Paul McGann playing an evil version of the Doctor as the Valeyard. Okay, so full turn of events here. We've just looked at more of a child-friendly, child-focused spin-off. This one could go in the opposite direction and be far darker. It would be interesting. I do feel like sometimes when you have a character like the Master or the Valeyard, the reason they work is because they're put up against a character like the Doctor, so you have that contrast of the good versus evil. If you have a show that's just focused on a villain, is there much room for it to grow? Now, obviously, the Valeyard isn't necessarily a villain, but they kind of are. What's the storyline if we have a story focused on the Valeyard? Where's it going? Does the Valeyard have a companion? If so, what is it? Are they like their evil sidekick? So I like the concept, but I'm struggling to think of the overall plot of what that story would be, which is why I think a master story on their own also wouldn't work, because, as I say, you need that contrast to further the story along. Okay, this one, I'm not even sure if this is a serious one. This is from VP Wedding, and they say, it's time for something new. The 12 regeneration limit was there for a reason. The Doctor explodes, causing every human on Earth to regenerate and teleport randomly across the globe. Some people turn into hobbits or other fantasy creatures. There are dozens of people claiming to be each world leader. How would Earth survive? I feel like this sounds like it would be great for some sort of comedy, comic relief charity sketch, combining all sorts of different IP and fantasy worlds, hobbits, Jedi, having all of these different fantastical creatures appearing and disappearing. I mean, as a serious story, there's a lot going on here. But for something comedic, I think it would work. Like, it's making me think of, do you remember that, I think it was for Red Nose Day, to Comic Relief, I think. And there was a crossover with One Born Every Minute, Call the Midwife, Doctor Who, and it all combined to Jedward, I'm pretty sure. Like, this whole combination, a crossover of all these different shows that just wouldn't work as an actual serious crossover, but worked really well for a comedy charity sketch. This is what this is making me think of. Not necessarily something to be taken very seriously, wouldn't really last as a long-standing story, but definitely would be interesting to see as a comedy thing, as a comic relief thing. And you know what? We know Peter Jackson is a fan of Doctor Who, so he might be on board for a charity sketch. Let's get the hobbits in there. Let's get Gandalf in there as well. I don't know. Okay, here we go. Plenty of people suggesting that we have a 14 and Donna spin-off. Again, the fact that they were left there at the end of the giggle just suggests that we all thought it was going to happen. There are so many questions that are left unanswered by this whole bi-generation situation. We literally did a whole video on the state of regeneration, so if you haven't seen that, go check it out. Part of me is like, yeah, let's see what 14 and Donna are up to in their everyday life, and it could be, this really kind of non-sci-fi sitcom show that literally is looking at what the Doctor's life would be like if he stopped being the Doctor and just became a regular guy and had to go and get a regular job. And in that regard, I think it could be quite entertaining to just see the Doctor trying to acclimatise to life as a human. And all the things he's never had to worry about before, like sticking to a daily routine, going to the supermarket. That could be really, really interesting, but is it really Doctor Who? I don't know. Obviously with Catherine Tate, we had the Catherine Tate show, so it could be something that we saw as a comedy sketch one-off thing that could be quite entertaining and then wouldn't kind of overdo it. But if we're going on down the route of just having more adventures of the Doctor and Donna, we're essentially repeating series 4, in which case we're basically making Doctor Who again. I guess the fact that he's on Earth makes it maybe a bit similar to the 3rd Doctor, but essentially it's still the Doctor and his companion saving the Earth. So it muddies the water then as to whether it's a spin-off or not, I suppose. Look, I wouldn't be against it. Series 4 is my favourite series of Doctor Who. David Tennant and Catherine Tate are my favourite duo in Doctor Who, so of course I'm going to love to see more of them. But realistically, is a 14 and Donna spin-off that isn't completely removed from the science fiction, just another series of Doctor Who. And in a similar vein, we had a lot of suggestions for a Meta-Crisis Doctor and Rose spin-off in the alternate reality, in the alternate universe. Similar to the 14th Doctor and Donna, are we essentially just having another series of Doctor Who in an alternate reality? They're doing the same things as they were when, in series 2, but it's just in an alternate reality. So as much as I'd love to see it, are we just repeating it? Is it just Doctor Who in the alternate reality? But what I did see in a similar vein that I kind of prefer, I think, from Ben Corner 3772 says, as they keep bringing Rose Tyler back, why don't they do a spin-off of her between Series 2 and Series 4? Now that I can get behind. Not just let's rehash Series 2 and have the adventures of Rose and the Metacrisis Doctor, which I must say, if we went again down the non-sci-fi route and just explored the Metacrisis Doctor having to live a normal life with Rose, that could be a really wholesome story. A bit like when we got to John Smith and Joan Redfern and this whole life that they could have lived. That could have been fun. But this I enjoy. This idea of having a spin-off of Rose, the events that led up to Rose being able to get back to the normal universe in Series 4. All of the time from when she got trapped there, working hard, developing all the technology alongside her dad, alongside Mickey, alongside all the people that made it possible for her to travel back. Obviously, all the events that we saw at the end of Series 4, the stars going out, that happened already in Rose's universe because they were ahead. So seeing in real time these things happening and Rose being desperate to get to warn the Doctor, that could actually be a really interesting story to explore. And I would say maybe more interesting than just seeing Rose and the Metacrisis Doctor, if we want to make sure that it's still a spin-off and has the sci-fi elements. If we're removing the sci-fi elements, then a lovely, wholesome story of the Doctor and Rose and the Metacrisis Doctor just living a life together. Lovely. Would it be very entertaining to watch, though? There has to be drama. And the last one, again, is something that I saw mentioned by plenty of people, but the one I picked out was from Savix Customs, or Sorvix Customs. After Bannerman Road, what the Bannerman Road gang have been up to must include K9, no point without K9. Obviously, when Elizabeth Sladen died, the Sarah Jane Adventures ended. And on the one hand, it felt like a respectful thing to do to not continue that show without its lead. But on the other hand, I do feel like we had enough central characters that we could have continued that show with Clyde and Rani and Luke and Skye. And although Sarah Jane wouldn't have been there, her legacy would have continued through these kids who would carry on doing her work for her. We always want to know what happened to those characters. And now that they're older, it could be interesting for us to return to Bannerman Road and to see that these characters have carried on Sarah Jane's legacy and didn't just grow out of it. They stayed and are still fighting the good fight and protecting the Earth from Slitheen. Although I saw lots of comments about let's explore this character and let's bring back this character, or let's just bring back Torchwood or the Sarah Jane Adventures, I do think returning to Bannerman Road, having now left a gap, and exploring the adult characters as they are now, continuing Sarah Jane's legacy, would actually be really, really heartwarming. I also think, Jo Grant appeared in the Sarah Jane Adventures, so even if we needed that kind of figurehead as a character, I think it would be really, really lovely to have Katie Manning leading that show, to carry on Sarah Jane's mantle, if not the kids themselves, who are now no longer kids at all. So I do like that, and just for the sake of the nostalgia of my childhood, I just would love to see a return to Bannerman Road. So that's just some of the comments that we had on our post. There were lots of other suggestions. Thank you if you did suggest a spin-off to us. If we went through all of them, we'd literally be here until tomorrow, or maybe even the next day. And there's more episodes of The War Between the Land and the Sea coming this weekend, so probably should focus on those. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.